Hi, this is Mr. Moss, and in this video we're going to look at how to round numbers. We're really going to be paying attention to two different ways in which we can round numbers. We're doing this quickly on the fly here, so my apologies if the camera's a little shaky. So let's say we were rounding the number 847, and we're trying to round it to the biggest possible place. In that case, that's the hundredths place. Really what we're doing is we're learning where... We're learning where 847 fits on a number line. We know that if I round down, it could be 800. We know if I round up, it could be 900. And right in between the two, we're looking at about 850. So the real question is, where does 847 fall on that number line? Well, it's going to probably fall pretty close to 850, but that still tells us that it's much closer to 800. So I'm going to draw the arrow downward to show that we're rounding down to 800. That's one way to visualize it, but something that's been helpful for a lot of kids is imagining this as a bell curve. And really, it's no different from imagining the number line, except imagine that number line being bent, so it's pushed upward in the middle and pulled down at the sides. We know that when we have the number 847, we can find the high and low numbers. And again, if I'm looking at the number 847, I could round that down to 800, or I could round that up to 900. So in the middle of that, 800 and 900, my midpoint is going to be 850. So the real question is, where does 847? And that's where I like the bell curve, because when I plot 847, I know that that's going to be pretty close to it's going to be right around here. If this is 800, this is 850. We know 847 is going to be really close. But still, imagine this is like a roller coaster. 847, we know, is going to round down to 800. So that's going to allow us to round our number. Now, to point out, these two strategies, really, they're the same thing. They both have a number line. It goes across. This one happens to be bent. They both have our low points. They both have our high points. They both have the midpoints. They both plot where 847 belongs. And they both have the arrows here that show that we're rounding down to 800. So these are really one strategy, and I can use this strategy. We'll come back to it in just a moment. The question is, what if you're working with a bigger number? Well, it'll still work the same way, by the way. If I have a bigger number, let me just draw that bell curve right there. So let's say I've got the number 43,268. That can round down. If I'm looking to round that to the largest possible place value, that's either going to round down to 40,000 or it's going to round up to 50,000. I know that in the middle, my midpoint here is going to be 45,000. So if my midpoint is 45,000 right there, I have to plot 43,268. That's going to probably go, I don't know, maybe over there. And the good part is whether it belongs here or here or here or here, it doesn't matter. The idea is we know that it's on this side of the bell curve. So I've got my 43,268, and that's telling me that I'm going to round down and that it's closer to 40,000. So you can see that the roller method, it's also the bell curve method, can be a really great way of rounding numbers. But in all the examples that we've done, we rounded to the largest possible place value. In this example, that was to the 10,000ths place. In the last example that we did, we were rounding to the nearest hundredths place, 800 or 900. What happens if you're rounding a number and you're not rounding to the largest possible place? That makes it a little bit trickier. Let's use the same number, 43,268. 43,268. 268. There's a 5-step process we're going to use to round this number. And the first step is to find what place value you're rounding to. Sometimes that'll be given to you in the directions. It'll say, round this number to the nearest 100, let's say, or 1,000. Sometimes you'll be able to tell that because there'll be an underlined digit. So let's say we've got the hundreds place underlined. All right, so we know now that we're rounding to the nearest hundreds place. I'm going to write my high and low benchmark numbers above and below my real number. And that's kind of like using the same thing that we did before where we put our low and our high numbers here, except we're going to be choosing different ones here. If you don't know what those benchmark numbers are, there's a good strategy for it. Any place values to the left of the place where you're rounding to are going to stay the same because we're not changing them. So we know it's going to round to 43,000 something up or down. 43,000 something. The real question is what we do with the place value that we're rounding to. We have a little rhyme that we say, 5 or more let it soar, 4 or less let it rest. So it could either soar and go up to be 200 something, or, I'm sorry, I caught my mistake right there. It could either go up to be 300 something, or we could round down and it starts as 200 something. So when we're rounding down, we know we keep that number the same. We're not going to go down to 100 something. And then lastly, we look at the place values to the right of it, and they're going to become zeros. Anything to the right of it is just going to become a zero. So it tells me that I'm going to round to either 43,300 or 43,200. We have to decide which one. The way we do that is we look to the right of the place value that we're rounding to, and this is going to help us make that decision. Here's where we use that rhyme again. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So let me even add that clue here. 5 or more, let it soar. That means you're going to be rounding up. Or 4 or less, let it rest, which means it's going to round down. So I'm looking right over here. That's a 6. That's 5 or more. That's telling me that we are going to let it soar. We're going to round up to a larger place value or larger number, 43,300. Now this strategy works no matter what place value I'm rounding to. So let's do the same thing, 43,268. 43,268. But this time, let's round to the thousands place. This works no matter what. Again, we need to find our high and our low benchmark numbers. So we do that by looking at the place value to the left of where we're rounding it. So that's telling me it's going to be 40,000 something. And now, for this place value, I have to decide. It's either going to go up to be 44,000 something, or it's going to stay the same at 43,000 something. And like we said before, anything to the right of our place value that we're targeting is going to become 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So I know that I'm either going to round this up to 44,000 or down to 43,000. Again, that's if I'm rounding to the nearest 1,000, which I'm doing right here. So now we have to decide which is the right way. 5 or more, let it soar. We're going to look at the place value to the right of my underlined place. 2. Are we going to round up or down? Well, 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. 2 is definitely 4 or less. So we're going to round down now to 43,000. And that makes sense. 43,268 is definitely closer to 43,000. We could also use the bell curve method that I introduced to you earlier for this. So if you wanted to visualize that there, we could draw that bell curve again. And I can put in 43,268. What makes this a little harder is you still have to figure out what are those high and low numbers. So I know from before that it's 43,000 or 44,000. But it helps, I think, for a lot of students to be able to go step by step to realize that, okay, the number to the left is going to stay the same. The place value that we're rounding, it's either going to go up or stay the same. And all the digits on the right are going to stay 0. It's not as easy to figure it out magically from here. Still, my midpoint is 43,500. And when I go to place my 43,268, I know that it's going to be right about here. And it's telling me still that I'm going to round down. So this is really going to work the same way. Whether I use my bell curve rounding method whether I use the strategy that I just showed you here, or whether we go back at the beginning. I think I dropped that sheet of paper where we drew the number line. Any of these are going to really work in order to help you to round numbers. This is Mr. Moss talking about rounding numbers, and I hope this was a helpful guide for you.